Thank you. Thank you, Gaeltacht, and welcome again to RT. Thank you for coming in. I just want to focus on the other part of your revenue, that the commercial side, which you say is about 40%, because obviously, there's a lot of focus here on the licence fee, and, I see in your briefing material that you've provided, and thank you for doing so, a strong focus on that and the threat to Irish programming generally, and if there is no action and so on. So I just want to look at the other side of your revenue and the commercial advertising side. Clearly, you're a dual-funded model. There isn't any other media organisation that I'm aware of that gets state support. Irish Independent, Irish Times or Virgin Media or any. So it's very, very significant, $1 billion over that period, 2015 to 2019. So on the commercial advertising, can you explain to me what is your advertising unit rate? So, for example, what's that phrase, the cost per 1,000 eyeballs? Isn't that the advertising unit? So what's that here, and say how does that compare to an equivalent unit in the UK?
Okay, thank you for the question, Deputy. First of all, advertising rates or the cost per 1,000, as you refer to, that depends on the audience that you're targeting. So we have a wide range of audiences. So all adults, young adults, ABC ones, men, etc. So the cost per 1,000 is based on the audience. So again, I can happily furnish you with some broad outlines of that.
Give me an average figure. Give me what the median point would be.
I haven't got that to hand, Deputy, because I don't deal in the detail of that on a daily basis.
Perhaps Richard, perhaps you're your Chief Financial Officer. What I'm looking for is to determine what is the cost here and how does that compare to the UK market?
Okay, so if you're looking at cost comparisons, so I suppose the cost of advertising generally, it's a supply and demand market.
I really am actually just looking for the...
If you compare ourselves to, for example, Virgin Media, our rates are more expensive. If you compare ourselves to the UK, again, I think we're probably slightly cheaper than the UK.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm asking because, and I'm not asking about other Irish markets because RT takes such a dominant position in the market. Your strategy in relation to pricing and commercial advertising has an effect on the rest of the sector, and that's very important. So my question is, what is the unit price and how does that compare with an equivalent unit price? Let's say, for example, I'm Procter & Gamble and I want to sell washing fluid to adults. And I want to advertise on ITV or I want to advertise at primetime ITV versus primetime RT. How much is the difference? What's the difference? Are you both pitching at the same level, or are Irish audiences being sold more cheaply to Procter & Gamble than the UK?
Again, as I say, each market it's all down to the merits of the market. Again, another important difference here for us is we have half the minutage of most commercial broadcasters. Because we are funded by both licence fee and commercial broadcasting. So again, and also I think, Deputy, it's comparing markets it is interesting, and quite often, we are also competing with overspill of UK channels coming into this market. But I think what we do is we deliver a premium product in the market. We deliver the most eyeballs, as you rightly point out, and the cost of that within the market is therefore more expensive.
So as I say, I can look for a value because, you use the market comparisons are valid when, for example, we talked about the risk of your talent flying to other markets back in April. So it is relevant. And, what I'm just looking for, what is the unit price of advertising and how does that compare to the UK? If you don't have
Deputy, it varies. I don't have it to hand, and it varies hugely by audience type. That's the key thing.
Okay, what about discounts to large commercial brands? If I'm a brand in Ireland, how easy is it? Do you take all brands? Do you refuse anybody?
Again, we're obliged to take all advertising. We're a universal service, and that's how we operate.
So obviously you don't take tobacco and things that are...
Yeah, absolutely. There are rules and regulations.
Set that aside.
Absolutely.
But other than that, for example, have you ever refused advertising?
Again, Deputy, I would have to check with the commercial team on that. I think, by the rules and regulations, we're obliged to take advertising once it falls within the legitimate rules of the codes. So, for example, there are rules around, certain. There are also probably some.
Like what? Which rules? Sorry, just to go back to whose rules are these specifically? Are they RTE rules or different rules? I don't mean statutory rules because that's obvious.
These would be rules by the Code of Advertising rules. So, for example, as you mentioned, tobacco advertising,
sure.
There is none. Also, for example, we have a self policing code that we offer within our kids programming. There's no advertising within our kids channel, for example. Okay. So there are a number of areas like that.
In all other circumstances then, as long as it's compliant with not being tobacco and not being children, you don't refuse advertising from anybody?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
That's my understanding, certainly.
All right, because I have brands that tell me that is not so, and that they've looked to advertise on RT and to try to develop their brand on television to those eyeballs and haven't been able to, or have been cut off having advertised previously either in the RT Guide or other RT platforms. So it may be something to go back to.
Deputy
Carol
McNeill could have just said to you that the subject that you raised with Ms. Forbes, to want to be fair, that it wasn't on the invite list. Now look, I appreciate it's an issue of concern.
Well, let me ask a different question, Chair.
What I would suggest maybe is that if Ms. Forbes hasn't got the answer this morning, maybe that she will give you a written reply in the coming weeks on that, if that's satisfactory.
No problem. Could I ask something in relation to the material provided in your own briefing document on page 5? It says a number of expected total TV trading revenue, including sponsorship, declined by 8.1% overall. A number of expected sponsorships did not materialise due to changes in the programme schedule and a number of delayed productions. Can I ask about that? To what value? What was the value of that expected sponsorships that did not materialise? And what were the circumstances in which they didn't materialise? I mean, for example, how much notice did they have? Why is it that RTE didn't manage to get that revenue?
First of all, Deputy, I think it's probably, first of all, our commercial strategy is commercially sensitive, and we endeavour to make as much commercial money as we can in any given year. Things happen on an ongoing basis. And again, in terms of an actual figure, again, I don't have that to hand, nor I think that I'd probably give it to you because it is commercially sensitive. But I think it's just to state that in a given year, things change, things happen. Advertisers change their plans, we change our plans. I suppose it's the very nature of the beast we're dealing with, and that happens in any given organisation such as ourselves.
And I think back in 2019, we were talking about a cost-saving measure of approximately 60 million over 3 years. Can you just outline to the committee specifically how much has been realised from that?
I'll ask my colleague Richard to maybe elaborate on that one.
Good morning, Deputy. Yeah, that 60 million was to be achieved, 10 million in 2020, 20 million in 21 and 30 million in 2022. So I suppose just to give some background to how it was to be achieved, 50% of it was to come from pay-related savings.
No, I know. I appreciate that because I've had the opportunity to read into that. I'm just asking how much has been, and I know COVID happened and there was decline in revenues and government supplanted a lot of that with its own advertising revenues and that, but I just need to know how much of that 60 million cost-saving measure was actually implemented, please.
Well, in 2020, we would say that we delivered the majority of that saving. Now, we delivered it in slightly different means than we had originally envisaged that we would deliver it when we drew up the plans in 2019. I mean, in terms of generic cost savings, we overachieved. The second element of it was around content and service changes, which I would say we delivered on. The pay element of it, we didn't deliver on all of that, although we delivered on some of it. But putting the whole thing, the mix together, I think we could say that we did deliver on those figures.
How much did you deliver?
How much did we deliver? I would say we delivered the 10 million.
10 million?
10 million.
In total?
Yes, yeah.
Was it not 60 million over 3 years?
It's 60 million over 3 years, yeah. But
that was back in 2019?
Yeah. No, it was 20. It started in 20, 21, 22. So we're only halfway through it at the moment.
So you're halfway through and you've delivered 10 out of 60?
We have delivered in 2020, we delivered 10. Another 20 was to be delivered in 21. Do
you think you're on track for the 3 years?
I think there's a risk with it. The economy, the world is changing continuously. There's a lot of risks out there. Inflation is coming at us now. I think we We're on track with it. I think it's going to be difficult to achieve it. What I would say to you is that RTE has a very good track record of achieving cost savings. If you look back over the previous 10 years, we've managed to keep our operating costs around 335 million.
But let's just look, if you don't mind me just interjecting, and it's only because of time that I would do that, I apologise. You know, there's a huge focus in your materials about the 65 million and how much you need that. There's a cost-saving project of 60 million, which is important. And yet, you know, what I don't see in your materials is beyond the realisation of licence fee, you know, non-evasion of licence fees, what as being plan A. I don't see plan B. I don't see plan C. I don't see, and maybe it's happening, you know, efforts to consolidate production staff, to, you know, a serious move out of Donnybrook, as other television stations have done, to periphery centres, coordinating with other production facilities to try and consolidate costs on that side while maintaining editorial difference. You know, do you really still need RTE2? Can you change the model entirely to protect RTE1 as entirely publicly funded with no ads? Can you check, you know, there just doesn't seem to be a plan B or a plan C. I'm worried about the implementation of the cost-saving mechanisms, which are nearly equivalent to the difference in the licence fee. And I just wonder what's plan B.
No, let me just go back. We put a plan in place in 2019. There was 3 elements to that plan. The first part was stabilising and diversifying commercial revenues. The second part was controlling our costs and reforming them. And the third part was additional public funding. Now, the first 2 elements of that were under our control, or substantially under control. And I would say we have delivered on those. If you look at commercial revenues, we've managed to, I know we're talking about 2020 here, but 2021, we have grown them and they're back to nearly where they were in 2018. On the costs, as I've just said, we have delivered most of those cost savings, albeit in a different manner than we had planned to do it. It's the third element that's outstanding, the public funding element, and that's a big part of the plan. And if that's not delivered, we still have a big gap in our, you know, basically in the bottom line going forward. And that's where the issue is. I think the parts that are under RTE's control, we have a plan and we're working to those. Closing RTE2 wasn't part of the original plan, so it's not something we're looking at.
Mr. Collins,
and the other thing,